I think this is a great opportunity for us to get together and have a look at what we've done so far. You know, you could be as critical as you can, okay, particularly along the lines of further enhancing the model and the systems that we've been developing. And ever since we had our meeting, this was like a few months ago, there's been more progress, as I said, in terms of the depth and the width of this system that we're trying to develop here. So what we'd like to do is let's go through a few slides in terms of what we've been working on, and then we'll have a good half an hour to 45 minutes actually demonstrating two systems that we've almost near completion. One of them is the simulation system, which you all know about, and there's also the clinical decision making. So that's something we want to demonstrate. We then have a list of publications in pipeline. There's quite a few papers coming out of this actually. So just a briefly touch on that, okay, and then we can discuss any other matters towards the end. So that's the kind of the agenda over the next, I would say, an hour or so, just over an hour. So, what have we been working on? We've come up with this kind of a nice a graphical depiction of the SmartHIV solutions that we're working on. So, amongst all the models that we've developed so far, we've always neglected something, and that's patients. We've always neglected patients, and now we want to make sure patients are at the center of what we're developing. So there is an app that is currently under development, which we'll talk about that later on, and how that app feeds into our SmartHIV solutions, how it feeds into all of the other systems that we're developing. So we're trying to make sure that all of those stakeholders within HIV sector, they're all considered within a single platform. So this platform is now bringing the patients, service managers, policymakers, clinicians, nurses, even clinical trialists into a single platform in order to be able to solve certain problems. So we're trying to make sure the system deals with all the unmet needs and gaps within the HIV sector. Okay, so previously, when we did when we first started this, the system was more towards service managers, policymakers, and to a certain extent clinicians. And now that's further extended so that we take into account all of these individual stakeholders within a single, a web-based, easy-to-use system. Okay, so that's the kind of the thinking that we have. Now, we wanted to start with patient, this first slide over here, which is the app that's under development. So the app basically asks a series of questions. I believe there's over 70 questions, which really collects information about individual patients, okay, much more deeper than most open MRS or electronic medical records out there. So we're collecting so much information around patients, for instance, cognitive, emotional quality of life, their adherence, okay? So wide range of data that we're collecting so that we're able to produce some results, okay, that we can feed back to the patients themselves. So we're able to, for instance, track a patient's adherence level and self-efficacy assessment over time. We can track their nutrition, their social, cognitive, emotional quality of life, and their impact on HIV. And we can feed back all of these findings back to the patients themselves. We're able to give some evidence-based information depending on their needs. We're able to give some motivational nudges. So if there are issues around, say, adherence, then we'll be able to say, hey, what's going on? Okay, and provide some assistance in that sense. We can provide some predictions around risk of cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome. So all of these additional information can be provided depending on what type of data the patient provides. We can engage the patient with their clinicians or next of kin or guardian, if in the case of a child or an adolescent. So if there is an issue, if there is anything that's alarming, a clinician can be alerted. The patient says, I'm suicidal. I'm not taking my medication anymore. Okay? And all of this information can be fed back to the clinician via the app. So that's under development, and hopefully by early autumn we should have something to demonstrate. Any questions? So please don't be shy. Please fire as many questions as you can during the presentation if anything doesn't make sense. Okay? So
sorry, how many persons can access the app? Mentioned some confidential issues with patients. So how many persons can access the app at any given time?
Okay.
Confidentiality.
Sure. So the system will have to be GDPR compliant. So we have to bear in mind all the data security and confidentiality. The data can only be provided to a clinician if the consent is given by the patient. So there is a feature within the app, okay, so that the consent is given for a clinician. So it will only be a single person over here, their clinician, who would be able to see this information, and nobody else.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is a great question. Please fire as much as you can throughout the presentation and the demonstration of the system. Okay. Next is something called the SmartHIV Clinician. Now, this particular platform, again, is web-based, very easy to use, which Shola is just going to demonstrate later on, is to be able to assist a clinician, okay, in order to provide optimal, for instance, ART regimen selection. So you've got a specific patient with very specific attributes, whether if it's a male, whether if it's the patient has any comorbidities, has a co-infection, or for instance, the patient is pregnant. Okay, that should be provided to the patient based on these attributes. Okay, and the system will be able to provide information around comorbidity management. So the patient could be diabetic, or the patient may have some other comorbidities. Okay, taking other drugs, and whether if those drugs interact with the HIV medication the patient is on. So all of this will be presented in the form of a very easy to use graphical outputs. So there's lots of statistics and graphical illustrations that will be provided via this particular platform. I mean, I don't want to spend huge amounts of time over here because Shola is going to demonstrate this. Okay, so that would kind of help your understanding in terms of the system that's been developed. Okay.
And also
any questions?
Yep. Subspecialty among clinicians.
So can you repeat that again?
Subspecialties among clinicians. In other words,
okay.
2, 3, 4 clinicians are managing one HIV patient. Cardiologist,
okay. Yep.
Nephrologist. So information amongst all the team members.
Yep. So all of those team members would have access to the platform if they wanted to. So whether if there's a HIV clinician and or a subspecialty clinician would have access to this system.
Okay.
Okay.
And everyone will have, they will have access to a single source of the truth because you'll be working on the same system,
yep.
and you can see what each other assessment is, or
Yep. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So we should also bear in mind that the information coming from the app, the patient app, along the lines of clinical information, because we're able to track individual patient over longitudinally. Okay, so for instance, if there are any adherence issues the patient is having, or if there are any cognitive, emotional issues, all of these will be alerted to the clinician via this particular platform. Okay, So that's what it means by saying smartly engage with your patient in real time to drive adherence, improve outcomes, and general health. So this particular platform, SmartHIV Clinician, communicates with the patient app. So our next kind of system we're developing, which I'm sure I'm not going to go through huge amounts of time with this one here because we're going to be demonstrating, is we've managed to capture HIV service to a certain degree of accuracy within a computer simulation environment. So, and within that computer simulation environment, users, so this could be a service manager, this could be a clinician, this could be a policymaker, where they can make changes to their system and explore the impact it has on their service demand, on utilization of their services, on things like human resource planning, so how many doctors would I need if there's an increase of 10% on my patient workload? What impact does that have on my nurses, my medical lab scientists, and so on? So users will be able to test their service using the simulation over a wide range of scenarios. So we're going to have a look at that in a bit more detail. Okay? So that's our third kind of system that's in development. But this one is the nearest to near completion.
Yeah, actually, this is the one that we started with.
Yep.
And over time, the scope had increased drastically because we kept thinking that something is missing and needs to be added. So as we kept thinking something is missing, we find out what's missing and we keep adding things up. So that's why I think it's the one that is most completed, like Aaron said. But it would be nice to just share what has been completed so far, so that you guys have a good understanding of what we've been doing since the last time you heard from us.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that, Shola. We've also thought of, well, what about clinical trials? Okay. Why can't our system that we're developing also provide assistance to all the clinical trials that's being carried out for HIV patients? Well, we know patient recruitment is a big problem. So the patient app, because this is an app, we will have patients and data coming from all over the world. So the app would then provide assistance. So it would assist clinical trials so that they are able to locate and find patients in real time globally. So during the clinical study, okay, depending on whatever the inclusion and the exclusion criteria is. Okay. Now, once these patients are then we've managed to identify those patients, well, we've got our simulation model that we could use, and that simulation model could provide us with the budgeting of the clinical trial. It will allow us to plan, assess, and monitor the impact of scenarios on costing of the clinical trial. And during the clinical trial, well, clinicians or those who are involved in the trial could engage with the patient in terms of monitoring patients, how they're getting on with the medication, and how would they be able to minimize the missed visits, some very important information that could be shared with the patient along the way during the trial period, and so on. So this is another system, okay, that we're currently developing so that it assists the clinical trials carried out for HIV patients, and this will significantly kind of improve the time of completing trials, okay, because it does take a long time to recruit patients and to be able to conduct the trial itself, okay. This will save huge amounts of time and effort. And
I mean, this is Andre here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Andre. Yes.
Yes, I was trying to understand. I mean, how does it work in terms of personal data protection? That component of the trial.
You mean when conducting the clinical trials?
Yes, yes. I mean, how does it work in terms of? I mean, you talk of monitoring people even likely outside their clinical follow-up. How would that work in terms of personal data protection? Because from someone from outside to access that, I mean, to monitor you, they basically need to try your personal information. Yes.
Sure. I mean, in terms of, well, the first things first is a consent will have to be given by the patient. Okay, so without any consent, there's no data will ever be provided to anyone. Okay, so the data will be stored in a very secure environment in the cloud. Okay, so as I said, all the GDPR and confidentiality issues will be taken into account. There's no way we can share any data with anyone, okay, unless all the consent and security issues are dealt with. Okay, so I mean,
that's reassuring.
Yeah, so because I mean we use, for instance, data coming from say inpatient, outpatient, A&E, for instance, in the UK. We have it within the university, and there is a huge kind of loop that we have to cross over before this data gets into our hands. Okay, even right now, for instance, because of COVID, we can't have access to the data. The data is based at the university. We can't. Okay, so it's there's a big jump that we need to kind of or we need to consider before data can be shared with anyone. Okay.
Okay.
And there's also the anonymization step that even if data needs to be shared, those data need to be anonymized such that you cannot identify any particular patient. However, like Aaron mentioned, in terms of patient to clinician relationship or exchange of information, this has to be based on pre-consent. So it has to be a consent given by the patients to share their information with their GP or with their clinician, not outside, just with their clinician.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, anything that's got to do with data and data sharing, confidentiality issues it's something that needs to be taken very, very seriously, very seriously. And we've been doing that for years now, really, well over 15 years now.
Just to also mention that apart from the data that is coming through the patient app, we are not storing any data. Actually, the way the system is going to be set up is we are not hosting anybody's data. Otherwise, we might not even have enough space, or even we may not even be able to afford, keeping all the data from every client or every clinician. So the system is set up in such a way that if the clinician wants to connect their EMR to the platform, it's only an API. We don't store the data. We don't have access to the data.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Now, we've got another product, actually, that's currently in development. We're going to start developing this, is the EMI integration. So we've got OpenMIS, for instance, in most part of Africa. I can hear an echo. Is there?
Yeah, it's me. I'll fix it.
I think the audio, yeah. Okay, so what we're doing now is, if any EMRs out there, there's still an echo there. If you can just silence.
They're muted.
Yep.
Just mute and
muting will solve the problem. Have you muted? Yep, it's fine now. Okay. So the fifth element is now. Okay, we've got lots of data coming through patient app. We're providing so much for patients. We've got the simulation model, which is assisting service managers, policymakers, and so on and so forth. We've got the clinician dashboard, okay, or the SmartHIV clinician for clinicians in terms of optimal, for instance, ART regimen selection. But what about the EMRs that's currently collecting huge amounts of data? So what we're now doing is, though the EMR is going to be integrated within our platform, the objective is to be able to conduct series of work with it and generate some really interesting graphical outputs. So we will be able to predict in real time those patients at risk of hospitalization. So what's the probability of a patient being readmitted? What's the probability a patient has an adverse event? Okay, and so on. And so the idea is to be able to integrate this EMR, okay, so that we can produce some interesting results for patients and feedback to, say, policymakers and service managers, so they can keep track and evaluate and monitor how their service is running, okay, over an extended period of time. So there's still the HIV smart analytics that we're currently working on. So what I'd like to do is, shall we start the demonstration of the two systems so far, so the Smart HIV Clinician and Smart HIV Manager, and once we complete that, we can then come back to our slides, okay, to wrap it off. Okay? Can you all see my screen clearly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So what we have is, this is the simulation model. Okay, so there is a nice 2D isometric illustration of a typical HIV service around the world. So the system is captured to a sufficient level of detail so that we can then start running some scenarios, okay, in terms of, what if, for instance, there was an increase in the number of patients being diagnosed, okay, or something simple as, what if we were to reduce the number of doctors and increase the number of nurses? And there are hundreds or possibly thousands of different scenarios that we can run here. Okay? Now, I'm not sure whether if you can all remember, but do you all remember the conceptualization stage of when we were trying to capture the service? So all the way from initial diagnostic, okay, diagnosis until discharge, and all the kind of processes in between in terms of, monitoring the patient, the treating the patient, and so on. And so we're trying to capture a service within this simulation environment. Okay, so here typically you've got a patient that comes into the reception. They might go through a diagnostic stage, or if there's a group counseling going on, okay, they could be treated by a clinician. They could come back for a monitoring, for instance, their viral load or CD4 count, okay, and they're out of the service. Okay, so we're trying to make sure the user interface is as simple as it can be, okay, so that it can be utilized by any services around the world. So there are some control buttons over here. Now we've got this. We'll go through each of those control buttons in a few minutes. But the idea is if we can change these input parameters, okay, so that the model becomes service specific to any HIV service provider around the world. Okay, so let's start with the first thing. So when you click on demand, okay, so we've got a country selection. So because the model is generic enough, it could be run by any service around the world. The user would need to select the country, and so let's say we select Nigeria, okay, and you press OK. So what that does is that just populates certain input parameters for Nigeria, okay. Now, depending on the service, we can say, well, how many TX experienced patients do you have? So let's say you've got just under 1,100. How many naive patients? So new cases coming in the last 12 months? Approximately 100. Okay. Well, what's the kind of yearly increase in diagnosis? Okay. So we managed to get some of these statistics, the incidence and prevalence statistics. So you can easily change the percentages yourself. Okay, so this would then kind of populate the demand for your service. Okay, so when you finish click, the demand aspect of your service is now specified. A lot of the detail is really around the service itself. So we've got 4 sets of parameters, or 4 sets of groupings, in order to configure your HIV service. So let's start with patient attributes. And by the way, these are few of the input parameters that we've only extracted out of about 100. So we don't want the users to interact with all of those 100, okay? But we can expand this over time as and when needed, okay? So we're asking questions around, well, what's the gender split in percentages? So for this particular service, 29% is male and 71% female. And what about the the percentage splits in terms of the age groupings. So the vast majority of the patients are between 19 to 65 age group. Okay, and how many pregnant patients do you have in your service? Now, the whole idea of simulation is here you've got your current practice. So this is as is. This is this is how your service is operating. Okay, we're trying to make sure the system captures, okay, as is the current practice as best as it can. But what about interventions and scenarios? Okay, you can change these parameters and start running and testing the impact. Okay? I mean, this is just patient attributes. It might become a bit more useful when you're changing other parameters. Okay? Is this making sense so far to everyone?
Yeah? No, it is. Yes. It is.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And by the way, the sky is the limit. I always use this example in the simulation. The sky is the limit. We can change any input parameters. We can allow users to do anything as they wish. So because the needs of a service manager may not be the same as a policymaker, it might be different to a regional manager. Okay? So it's very kind of flexible in that sense. So this is not the end, this is just the beginning. So here we've got prevention. So let's say you've got a service who wants to expand their prevention services. So, you know, for instance, what is the number of HIV negative patients prescribed PrEP at your service in the last year? With one of the services, I think they've only had 43 cases. Right, I want to say expand this to 250 patients next year. And let's see what impact that has on a wide range of metrics. We'll go through what those metrics are later on. Okay, and what's your current split in terms of your PrEP and PEP? So 80% of this 43 is PEP. They're offered PEP, and only 20% PrEP. But what if I want to test 50-50? Okay, what impact does that have? So that's another scenario. So that's the scenario that I'm going to be demonstrating, actually, just for illustration purposes. And ART treatment. So with what we've done at the moment, we're only asking the percentage of patients prescribed, you know, depending on the class of ART regimen. So it seems like 93% of the cases is IN plus 2 NRTI. But what we will have in the future is the ART regimens themselves down below here. Okay, so that's kind of in the pipeline. Okay, in fact we've done it, but we haven't shown it here. Okay, so that's in the pipeline. Again, you can test scenarios around, well, what if we were to make a slight change on these ART regimens that's been prescribed? You know, guidelines do change, so WHO guideline might change, or the guideline for Nigeria might change, okay, and so on. Okay? The next part is monitoring and the time. So because this is discrete event simulation, now what the simulation is doing is simulation is capturing the service, because we're going to be running the service over an extended period of time, say 5 years. And when a patient comes into your service, they are there for X minutes, okay, Y minutes, so amount of time. So how long does it take on average, for instance, the monitoring of a new patient, a naive patient? Approximately 45 minutes. The monitoring of a TX experienced patient, 25 minutes. Well, what happens if we were to increase this to 35 minutes, 40 minutes? What change does it do on my human resource planning? Do I need more doctors? If so, how many? Do I need more lab scientists? Well, how many more? And there are quite a lot of kind of time-related or duration-related questions that we're asking. And by the way, most of these current practice that we have are pre-populated, so that's based on some of our interviews and the data collection templates that was provided, for instance, by Professor Isiche, by Kunle, for instance. Okay, so a lot of them are pre-populated. Okay, what about the number of visits? We know the number of visits, they change year on year. Naive patients, on average, they are seen around 8 times, for instance, in a year, whereas treatment-experienced patients twice in Nigeria, I believe it's 3 times in Kenya. But again, even that varies depending on the patient attributes. We know that the number of times a pregnant patient in trimester 3, they come in much more often than other patients. So the system does take these into account. Bear in mind, it's just that we are only allowing this set of parameters for users to play around with. But in the future, we could include all the others. Okay? Any questions so far? Is it all kind of sinking in?
Yeah.
So far, okay for me.
Making sense.
Is it making sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the monitoring side. So what we've done is, okay, we've now specified the demand for the service. We've configured the service in terms of the ART treatment, the monitoring, how long it takes, and if so, how many times do these patients come back. And let's not forget, the model takes into account also all the information around suppression, all the information around adherence and counseling, okay, all the information around failures, death rates, disease progression. They are all part of the system. It's just that we're not allowing users to play around with the input parameters yet, okay? And there's something around, let me just go through the costing.
Did you mention comorbidities?
Yes, there are comorbidities as part of it as well. They are all part of it. Okay. So now when we selected Nigeria from the country list,
Aaron,
yep.
If you just allow me, just to explain that there's a lot of data here, but not all this data can be shown to users to play around with, because some of these data are coming from systematic reviews, the literature, and we know that they are fairly standard within countries.
Yeah.
And remember, this is Nigeria, so those data that can be pre-populated, those are the ones that they are not presented to users to change. However, those things that are peculiar to individual clinic or services are those ones that that we're presenting to users to change.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that, Shola. Yep. Okay. So what I was just saying is, in the demand section, when users select the country, there is a costing. So we've managed to do a kind of an extensive literature review, actually, to find out individual countries' HIV treatment costs. Okay, so on average in Nigeria, first line ART costs around $113. Second line, $250 per year. This is, by the way, this is per year. And the laboratory costings is around $35 on average per patient, okay, per year. The overhead and personal cost, which takes into account all the staffing costs, all the estate costs, including electricity and so on and so forth, that's $328. Now, but what if there's a change in the costing? We can change these input parameters so that we can see the impact on the budgeting and financial planning of the service. That's if they're interested. Now, this might not be much of an interest in Nigeria, but places like the UK, in Europe, the USA, budgeting and financial planning is absolutely crucial. Okay, so especially when there when the need to change, when there is a need to change a service, this needs to be provided as part of a business case. But we'll have a look at that.
It is also the case in South Africa.
Oh, well, okay.
I think it would be important for Nigeria as well, because the managers or the planners will definitely have to be able to defend whatever they are putting forward, and they have to be able to have data to back that up.
Okay.
Regardless of how it's implemented.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know.
Sorry, we can adapt this to local currency.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course you can. You can change these numbers.
Secondly, sometimes there are costs that are not directly to the patient, but borne by donors. In other words, you can say it's free to the patient, but at a cost to the provider.
Okay.
Your
yes.
cost. For example, you say that $5 for the laboratory test. Yes, to the patient, but there is an unseen cost by donor agencies. So in actual fact, it's like $200, not actually $35. So how do you capture that total cost, actual cost?
Okay, what we're able to do, although it's not here, is we are going to have a column called Other. Okay? Now, there you'll be able to incorporate, just basically specify other costs per patient, okay, which will then be able to incorporate that into the calculation.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also possible that you can, I mean, when it's allowed, you can change the input parameters for the cost as you see, as you deem fit. So you can change those parameters. If you think, you know, if you want to capture unseen costs as part of laboratory costs, you can change 35 to 200, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it's very flexible. The system is highly flexible in terms of, and that's the whole idea, that we develop these simulation models so that you can play around with these values.
Exactly. Even the real cost can be run as a scenario. If you want to look at, you know, how much is actually to the patient and how much is borne by the donor, you can run that as a scenario while you leave the patient cost in the current practice, and you can just make a scenario of you know, adding other costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Yep. And also the power of simulation is you're able to change these parameters simultaneously and see the impact. So you might have a change in your demand, a change in the costing, a change in your patient profile. You might even have a change in your human resources.
Exactly.
But then it gives you this flexibility and the power.
Those are around.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Okay, now what we have is we've made our service a service or bespoke simulation. Now that this becomes your service, okay, which you can run scenarios. And for demonstration purposes, we're only running one scenario here. Okay, and that is the impact on prevention. Okay, we're only increasing. Last year, 45 patients were offered PrEP and PEP. What happens if this increases to 250? Only one single scenario. So there, we've got a few buttons here that you can play around with. So we're going to be running this service for the next 5 years. Okay, so we'll get the results 5 years later. Let's have a look. Slow speed. So here we are, and then I'm going to run. Tell me, what can you see on the screen? If you can see something happening on the screen. Can you see some patients moving around?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is the early stages of animation, so it's not perfected yet, but I think we thought it's good enough for demonstration, okay, to the team. So what we're now doing is we've got our patients coming into our service. So we've, based on the specification or the input parameters that we've provided, okay? So we're now simulating the service, okay, and we're going to be collecting quite an extensive set of results, actually, in order to assess as it is, and also what happens if we had 250 patients on PrEP. This is one single scenario, and I keep mentioning, the sky is the limit in terms of what kind of scenarios you can run with this. Okay? We don't want to wait for too long. Can you see a clock over here? Look, the clock is running.
Yep.
So we are 2nd of July 2020, and this is going to run all the way up to June 2024. Okay?
Even the numbers are changing. The number of patients in the current.
Yep, they are.
Is changing.
That's right. Oh, you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see the changes over time. There'll be, for instance, if your system is overloaded, i.e., you're not able to accept more patients, you'll be able to see that over here. So this will kind of alert you and say, look, the system is unable to cope. Okay. So what I'm going to do is now run at full speed. We don't have too long, so I'm going to run at full speed. There we are.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay. So we've just run two scenarios. Now, just based on one. At the moment, at the end of by 2024, June 2024, this service expects to have this many patients, just under 1,500. Okay. Now, because we've increased the number of patients from prevention from 43 to 250, okay, there's a few patients, a fair number of patients that will be averted. Okay, we are averting these patients. So you would expect fewer, slightly fewer, not too much, HIV positive patients. So the impact of having 250 patients on PrEP per year, okay, reduces number of patients by about 27 or thereabouts, okay. However, the impact on the number of visits, okay, on the number of monitoring visits of HIV positive patients. So currently, with the current system, we expect about 20,752 monitoring visits over the next 5 years. But because of this intervention, we expect around maybe 600 fewer visits by year 5. Okay. What about total staff hours? That includes all of your doctors, your nurses, medical lab scientists, your pharmacists, and so on. So over the next 5 years, it's about 16,914 hours of staff time allocated for treating and monitoring, and the prevention has reduced that by about 550 or thereabouts. Okay? Now, this is very high-level results. You know, for decision making, how useful is it? No, it's not useful at all. But we now want to have a look at much more detailed set of results. Okay? And if I click here, result, okay, that then sends all of my detailed set of results to an Excel file. Now, by the way, users will not be seeing this, okay? All of these results will come up in our platform, web-based platform. Let's not forget, Excel is not web-based, okay? And it will not be in the form of lots of numbers, okay? It will be in the form of graphics, and we're going to have a look at those graphics in a minute. But let me just quickly go through some of the results that we're extracting. I repeat, the sky is the limit. Because we've captured the service, we can generate anything we like. Anything. Okay? So here, what we have is number of monitoring visits for each of those years, because at the moment previously, okay, the simulation only had very high levels of results over the next 5 years, but what happens at each year? Okay? So that's the number of visits we expect in year 1, 2020 by naive patients. In year 2, 731 patients. In year 3, 759. It's increasing because we've got a 5% increase in diagnosis rate. Okay? What about the impact on TX experienced patients? Okay? We've specified what about those amongst failed suppression. So, okay? Those failed cases where suppression has failed, where they go through intensive adherence counseling, that's the number of visits we expect. Okay? And that's the total. What about those failed as a result of switching? So that's the number of visits we expect in each of these years. And this particular service has no children. In fact, okay, and how many visits do we expect by adolescents, adults, older adults, okay? And we're able to compare scenario 1 with scenario 2, okay? So what about visits by those patients on PrEP and PEP, okay? Let's not forget, in year 1, or in the first scenario, there's hardly any patients on PrEP, because they're all on PEP. But now there's a 50-50 split. What impact does that have? What about on counseling? Okay? What about, the demand for your patients? So how many new cases you have, how many TX experienced patients there are, and so on. So there's a lot of results that we're able to generate, and what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is all of these results is going to be within a dashboard. Okay. Now, Shola is going to demonstrate the dashboard straight after this here. Okay. But what we're going to be doing is, in the dashboard, when it's web-based, you won't see any of the stuff at the top. And what you will see is just the simulation part. Okay, or the graphics part. And so we'll be able to generate that service demand and utilization graphically. So, numbers are useful. I mean, having these kind of outputs is useful, but for users' perspective, especially if you're a service manager or a policy maker, I think graphical output seems to be a bit more appealing. So what we'll do is we will have some high-level results at the top, okay? Some very, how many treatment-naive patients, TX-experienced patients, how many patients on HIV co-infection, status, okay? How many of your patients adhered, okay? How many non-adherents were there? What about the demand for your service for each of these years for scenario, for current practice and scenario over each of these years? So that's the, what about for TX experienced patients, okay? So we'll be able to generate all of these results graphically within the dashboard. Is that all kind of making sense so far? Any questions?
Makes sense.
Good. Well, that's the demand side. What about human resource planning? What is your staff requirements over the next 12 months? Healthcare assistants, general nurse, receptionists, health advisors, nurses, doctors. So that's the number of hours of needed, okay, within each of these staff for your current practice and your scenario. That's 12 months, but what about your 5-year plan? Okay, how many hours of treatment or care will be provided by each of these staff for over the next 5 years? Okay, so again, here's another 12-month plan about staff requirements. So, you know, if there are staff shortages, you'll see it below the 0 line. If there are staff excess, and it's above the 0 line. Okay, what about your 5-year plan, the staff requirements? Okay, in order to maintain your demand for your service. Okay, for instance, if we wanted to run a scenario around uni age 90, and if you're hovering around 50% of your patients diagnosed, well, what's the impact if you were to increase that to 70%, 80%? How many more additional staff do you need? Okay, so there's a lot of dashboards that's currently being developed. But the good thing is the engine is complete. We are able to generate the results, and now it's just a matter of populating all of this within the dashboard. Budgeting and financial planning. You know, we were talking about total HIV cost of care for each of those scenarios, current practice and scenario, again over the years. The cost of care for naive, TX experienced patients, the cost of care by ART drug, the cost of laboratory, overhead and personnel, and other costing. Okay, the costing for older adults, adolescents, and children. Okay, so these are just some of the graphical outputs that will be produced within the dashboard. I think that more or less kind of summarizes the simulation model. I mean, by the way, I've only just basically illustrated one scenario, and it's just endless in terms of what other scenarios you could be running with it. Okay. Any questions so far about this particular system that we've developed? No? Okay. Shola, shall we now move on to the clinical decision-making platform?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, why don't you take over the presentation?
Sure. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So this is the clinical decision-making dashboard, and over time, the simulation solution or the system will also be moved to the web and will be looking similar like this in terms of input parameters and the result generation. This is not finished yet. In fact, it's far below in terms of finished product. But we just wanted to show what to expect in terms of the clinical decision-making tool. So when you come onto the platform, you would have a dashboard. This dashboard will be a place whereby you can, making some selections in terms of patient attributes. So it's going to be a form. Currently, this form is embedded within the clinical outcomes, but later it's going to move to a different page where you can select patient attributes. So I'm just going to, show how this works. Like I mentioned, it's not totally finished because it requires a lot of algorithm, and this algorithm is really not perfect yet. We still need to keep working on it to be able to also validate some of the results that it will be producing. But the essence of this demonstration is just to show what we are working on and what our vision is in terms of the HIV, smart HIV clinician. So let's assume that we have a patient who is newly diagnosed, is naive, and let's assume he's male and also an adult, and is let's say white. Let's assume that he's newly diagnosed within the last 30 days. So as you must know even better than I do, nowadays the WHO is actually promoting the test and treat model of care, whereby patients are treated immediately they are diagnosed. So having this, there are some other information, like co-infection. We can select if they've got what is the disease condition, but in a test and treat model, you may not even have this information. So, and of course, some of these are not really, finalized yet. So let's assume, I have this selection about this patient, and all I need to do is just to see, click on clinical outcomes. And the first thing I see is the attributes that I've selected is presented back to me, just to be able to confirm that, this matches the patient, I'm trying to treat. And after that panel is a high-level result of some of the best 5 ART that is selected by the algorithm, and this is mainly based on the suppression information, and suppression is defined as a viral load below 50 copies, which is the standard regulatory criteria for suppressed patients. Of course, I know that the WHO sometimes uses 200 or some other cutoff, but currently we've implemented the 50% cutoff, and it also presents some high-level results on percent HIV related deaths, and also all-cause deaths, which are all coming from based on the algorithm selection of the data. And after this high-level result, we would then have a more drilled down information about the expected overall success.
I'm not getting you. I mean, just clarify for me. I mean, those deaths, for instance, in the previous panel, are they actually linked to people with a simple adaptation, or are they general?
So this is actually related to the patient population within each of these regimen, and the all cause is just any death. Somebody got shot, not disease related. Okay. And so if we drill down, then there's some, a bit of categorization, in terms of some patient attributes that are selected. And looking at this, you'll be able to make a judgment of, what is the best for the patient if you look at the overall suppression and what to expect over time. So we've also split that into, after 24 weeks of treatment, after 48 weeks of treatment, after 96 weeks of treatment, and so on. And with this information, you also have, another information to take into consideration in terms of expected chance of drug-related adverse reaction, and also what level of adherence the patients need to maintain, to be able to achieve the clinical outcome in terms of suppression. So this just gives an idea of what we are developing and the information that is being presented to the clinician in a smart way, such that they have a compendium of information to be able to personalize, the treatment for a particular patient. And there are a lot of information that is that we can also put into consideration, which is still under development. We would have a dashboard for comorbidity management in terms of an HIV patient who has diabetes, for instance, and taking certain medication for that diabetes. We'll be able to look at what actually are the drug interactions to look out for, especially based on this suggested ARTs. In the future, there will also be the possibility for the clinician, if he doesn't agree with any of these 5, for instance, or any of this is not available in the practice, or he has something in mind, the clinician should also be able to choose what he wants to prescribe the patient, and then those bars will then come side by side with this, so that the clinician can have in an overall overview of what the clinician is choosing versus what the system is choosing.
Okay.
And like I mentioned, when we then change parameters here based on the patients that we have, some other input parameters will come up, especially for treatment experience. We might have mutation information. We want to know how long this patient has been on the current treatment. What is the treatment strategy? Is it to switch or no? We will have the opportunity to switch. What is the current regimen that the current one that the patient is on, so that because the aim of this is for is to switch the patient for whatever reason. And we will also have the drug information about the current comorbidities and the current co-medication to treat those comorbidities, to be able to check drug interactions. We will also have resistance management in terms of if there's any mutation that is that is currently experienced by the in the patient. What is the impact of this on the switch strategy? And there will be these are not ready yet, but these are also some of the things that we'll be able to present to the clinician. There will also be risk management, and we mean risk management in terms of cardiovascular risk, metabolic syndrome risk, all kind of risk score that we can generate based on the information that is presented by the clinician based on the patient's attribute. So in a nutshell, this is how, at the end of when this is ready and you see this dashboard, I think you will not recognize it because this is still a work in progress. We are not still, comfortable with these graphics. It doesn't look well enhanced to us. We want to make it better enhanced. We want to make sure that there will be, many other many other things that would need to be captured that we can also, present to the clinician. There's a lot of, algorithm behind this. The good thing is that currently, and we are not actually planning to make predictions. We are just, presenting the evidence out there using some AI-powered algorithm to be able to crawl and present the evidence based on clinical trials. So we are not making any predictions of, suppression by patient attribute. That's not the aim. We could do that, but as with predictions, every model is wrong. Some are useful, but before we even get there, we want to be able to present all the information that is out there, which is in disparate sources. We want to present that to clinicians, and in one single platform for clinicians to be able to make a better decision in patient management. So we are not. This tool is not going to replace the clinician. This tool is just presenting the evidence in terms of efficacy, safety, to the clinicians. Some of the things that we will also be presenting is the chance of some adverse events, adverse reactions, in terms of high level blood or lymphatic diseases that might come up from any of the medication, some cardiovascular disorder, all kind of safety events that are associated with some of these medication. In the future, because these are currently groups of adverse reactions, clinicians will be able to drill down to be able to see the granular preferred term for each of these comorbidities. So there's a lot of a lot of work that needs to go into that. But this is just to present a high level of what we are currently doing, and such that when it's finished, to have a bit of understanding of what you should expect when the project is done.
Can I go
don't know
back
if
to
there are questions.
Yes, can I go back to the prediction, please?
The presentation.
No,
Yeah.
the prediction. The prediction, because you said the aim wasn't to make predictions, but
No.
however, you're starting actually in most cases with literature derived estimate. So what would be the challenge of actually over time update some of those estimates to actually take into consideration those from the clinic? Let me take the case of failure on treatment, for instance.
Yeah.
After like a year, because I think you're capturing at some point the patient level data. After like a year of follow up at the clinic, you should be able to actually tell that clinic actually that of the patient who started on this medication, here is the failure profile based on your own population. Is that not the more reliable at that time to update actually the system? The system baseline to rather account for the setting specific estimate. I don't know whether I'm clear what I'm trying to ask.
I'm not sure I got that correctly, but what I understand is that you're thinking about if a patient comes as naive, and over time, when they come back, we should be able to predict how they will respond in terms of failure. Is that the question?
In some way, let me just put it again, because in the scenario of this patient, for instance,
yeah,
you had the possible line of treatment,
yeah,
the patient could be started on,
yeah,
and for those line of treatment, you had some sort of some failure rates,
yep,
based on each of the regimen. Actually, that failure rate comes from the literature, right?
Yeah.
So now, for a particular clinic, actually enroll into this system, let's say after a year or even two of follow-up, you actually have their own cohort of patients they would have started on those protocols. So they should be able to review their own data to actually understand of those started on that treatment at their clinic, actually what proportion fail, let's say after a year or after 2 years. That's what I was sort of talking about.
Okay.
The EMI integration will help you actually, Shola.
That's the EMI, yeah.
That's exactly. The EMI integration. Yeah.
Okay.
So the thing is that currently this is being presented as a standalone tool, right?
Okay.
But in the presentation that Aaron made, he mentioned the EMR integration into the HIV SmartHIV, which means that it's possible to have your EMR integrated to this tool. And I think I also mentioned it when Aaron was making the presentation. But in line with the fact that we don't host the data, but there's possibility to integrate, and via an API, this dashboard can communicate with that with the EMR, and you can actually look at the profile of your patient over time. That's definitely possible.
No, I missed that part of the talk.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I missed that part. That's when I was talking with the technology.
No worries. That's totally understandable. Yeah.
I think we need to bear in mind the simulation will be part of this platform. Exactly. The patient app will be part of this platform. The EMR will be part of this platform. They will all communicate with each other.
Yeah, if the users or the service want everything to communicate, they can communicate.
That's right.
And the data can be linked all around, and you have a holistic view of of what's going on in the service from service management perspective, from clinicians perspective, from patient perspective, from even people who are conducting clinical trials within the particular service. If they use the service as a clinical trial site, everything will communicate, and that's the beauty of this.
Sorry, what pumps up the communication fact? The patient's date of birth, patient's name, or what?
There will be a pseudonymized ID. Okay, yeah. So there will be a usual way of identifying anonymization.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, Shola, do you want to, are you done or?
Yeah, that's all. Unless there are questions. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few more slides to go. Okay, and then we can take more questions.
Yeah, let me just give you.
Can you make me the presenter so that I can?
Okay, I'm gonna do that.
Okay. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
No? Okay, let's just wait a few more seconds.
No, we got it now.
Yep, can we all see it?
Yes.
Okay, we wanted to bring this slide back again, okay, just to kind of make sure that now everybody understands what it means that we're trying to bring all of these stakeholders and all of these systems and processes within a single platform, okay? And I can comfortably say that after 15 years of developing such models, this is the first of its kind, really, for a particular disease area, all within a single platform. And that's why we're quite ambitious, and by saying this is to transform the way HIV disease care and management are deployed. We're bringing every stakeholder's perspective into one platform. And we believe it's unconventional and innovatively disruptive, because it's the first of its kind. It's AI-powered because there's a lot of prediction algorithms at the back end. That's what AI is all about, is to be able to predict the future, okay, either tomorrow, 5 years' time. And so the technology that we're developing is really addressing all the gaps and unmet needs, because it's the first of its kind, not just, as I said, first of its kind within HIV, but first of its kind amongst all other disease areas, okay? And we're very ambitious, okay? We've done a lot of the work. All the specification, all the speccing is now complete. And I think, I don't want to promise anything, but in order to manage expectations, by autumn, we believe we will have a good version of all of this ready for testing and deployment as well. Okay, so that's kind of, we thought this should bring this back to go through the system we're developing here. Okay, now, in terms of the core development team and collaborators, well, we're almost 15 as a whole, as a group. I'm hoping everybody has managed to kind of join in today and at least have a good feel of what we're developing. We've got core researchers, we've got an excellent development team as a software developer, app developers. We've got simulation developers, healthcare modelers, statisticians, simulators, and so on. Okay, there's lots of clinicians as well on board. Okay, so the team is very, very rich in that sense. Now, in terms of the publication plan, if you do remember, we did send something to International Journal of Health Planning and Management. We still haven't heard anything yet. It's under review. Because of COVID-19, and there's a new editor that's been assigned for this particular journal. It's taking us some time. But we have another article. We've almost completed, actually. By early next week, you should all receive this article. So this is the one, the need for a radical technology for holistic HIV disease management. So hopefully by next week you would have received the article for your comments and changes, and there's plenty of others in the pipeline. Okay.
Yeah, just to say something about why we've chosen the Bulletin of the World Health Organization. We just want a journal that is highly rated and that will give some kind of visibility to the tool. And we thought, where else can we go than the Bulletin? I know it's very tough to get in. I'm sure Andre and some people who have experience with the Bulletin would attest to that. It's really hard to get into it. We're already planning for the worst case scenario that it's rejected, because from my experience, what goes into the Bulletin is mostly things that are supported by the WHO, funded by the WHO. So we might have a bit of an issue. So we're already preparing the worst case scenario, and the next thing. The next journal we will try is the Lancet Digital Health. Though that comes with a cost in terms of the cost for publication, but we're looking for a way around that.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
My main comment is that after going for the bulletin, we should just be very patient. I guess they can be slow, those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can
that is if they don't reject it immediately.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm fairly confident if it goes through the review process, we'll have a positive outcome, but it's just the initial stage.
Exactly.
The initial screening.
If it's not rejected immediately, then the chance of publication is really high.
Yeah.
So I guess the issue is that early rejection, at times, that early rejection can actually come after a week.
Yep, it does.
It does. With them for some time, and then you just get that rejection that in-house.
Yeah.
They didn't write it highly for it to go out yet. To be aware of that.
Exactly.
Well, given that it's one of the most advanced system that we've developed over here, it's still ongoing, I think it deserves to get into this level of journal, really.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree.
Yep. Okay. So there's plenty of other papers. So, was it Professor Isiche saying something?
Commendable efforts. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, too.
Thank you.
So, when you do receive the paper next week, okay, when you've had, I might as well, there you go. It's just to say, look, it's here. Look, the paper is here, okay? So let me just go through it, okay? Please be very critical, okay? Be extremely critical, okay?
Exactly.
And make sure you do go through every word, every line by line, because these journals are not very easy to get into, okay? So, there's more papers actually. Sorry, we haven't finished. Just another few more slides. There's more papers coming. So there's going to be 7 papers, all 4-star level, by the way. All of these journals are at the highest level.
Exactly.
This
is the first phase.
This is the first phase. Then there's lots more coming. Lots more in the pipeline. Okay. So if you can bear with us, we're working very hard, but these will be coming through. Okay, in time.
Thank you.
And finally, that kind of concludes the kind of the presentation and the demonstration. We thought that we should get together as a team and go through the system that's in development. Okay. Any comments, suggestions, feedback, questions?
I mean, and I know you've been all modest in terms of everything is under development, but trust me, I think this is a massive achievement, and you must be commended for the work done.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. The few questions I asked them through, so I've got no further questions. apart from appreciating the work done.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in terms of the system we are developing, do you believe that it's innovative? Do you think it's unconventional? Do you think the system can be utilized around the world?
Highly innovative.
Oh, highly innovative. Oh, that's good.
Do you want to quickly share the survey?
Yeah, I can do, actually, if I can open up the survey. Yeah, I mean, some of you have seen the survey, but it's...
My suggestion, the graphical component should be well
Yes.
developed. People tend to capture more of graphical things than figures.
That's true. I agree. That's why we're going to have all of the results in the dashboard within a graphical kind of illustration. And by the way, what Shola has demonstrated in the dashboard, that's just the beginning. We are going to be working. We are going to make some radical changes in the graphics. Okay.
Good.
So what I wanted to do is very quickly. I know I've gone through this survey in the past. If I can bring this up, that is.
That's not this one.
Isn't it this one here? No. Ah, okay, sorry. It's the web-based, yes. Oh, where is it? Is this?
Up in my surveys. See all.
Ah, yes, okay. Ah, it's this one here. Okay. So all of the survey results is also in the paper. Okay. So what we're doing is we asked about 45 HIV practitioners around the world. Okay, which is made up of clinicians, researchers, diagnostic professionals, service providers, and so on. Okay, and we asked them a series of questions, and we said, what is your first reaction to an easy-to-use web-based HIV disease system? So we've got about, almost, I would say, 75% said somewhat, they are very positive or somewhat positive without having really understood what HIV modeling system is, to say the truth. Okay? And I'm sure if they had understood what it is...
At the beginning of the year, when we even didn't know where we were going with the project, we were just doing simulation, the service manager one. So...
Yep. So, and then they're the ones that, in fact, that came up with the features that we should be having. So, they said 62% said you should have personalized clinical decision making, which is the stuff that Shola presented. Resource planning, management, and service redesign. That's top the list. Well, that's what the simulation is all about. Comorbidity, co-infection, and resistance management. Again, the clinical dashboard. The prevention resource planning. That's the simulation is able to take care of that. Profiling ART regimen. That's the clinical dashboard. Budgeting and financial planning. That's the simulation. So we've taken on board all of these issues raised by the practitioners, okay? Because they have challenges. They are facing with these challenges, and we're hoping the system that we're developing here will alleviate some of these challenges. So how innovative is the system? Well, you can see, look, the vast majority said extremely innovative or very innovative. Again, without fully having understood the system that's been developed. Okay? Is it something practitioners need? Look, the vast majority said definitely need, probably need. Okay? So it seems like when the system is up and running and deployed globally, we believe this will be used by, I think, more than 50% of HIV services around the world. Okay? According to this set of results, clearly, I mean, it says, 87% says they need it. So, in terms of, well, will they recommend this system to their colleagues? Again, the vast majority says, well, definitely. We've got 36% who are promoters, 36% who said between 7 to 8. Again, quite a significant portion of that would be promoting the system, okay? And if it was available today, how likely would they use it? Extremely likely, very likely. That's the majority, okay? And also, we've asked questions around some annotated comments where, okay, in addition to the features that we've proposed above, what other features should we include? So when we read these comments, me and Shola, I think we've more or less have taken most of it on board, haven't we, Shola? I mean,
yes,
a lot of these are now within the system that we're developing. Okay, and that kind of completes actually for our presentation, the demonstration. If there's any other matters, any other questions, please ask. Okay. Any comments?
You've done a really, really good job. I think within the lockdown, what I'm saying now is like a lot of progress from drawing on the board and sketches.
Yes.
And
yes.
taking on the cameras, and it's huge. So
yep.
obviously, well done. I have no doubt about the success.
Yep. I mean, nothing is impossible when you have such a great team like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely nothing is impossible. So, we've got, actually it's not finished yet. We have a lot more to do over the next few months. So, we'll set up another meeting hopefully sometime in early autumn, very early autumn, and hopefully by then we should have a good set of these products.
In fact, I think at that point in time, I think you guys who are clinicians among us, you should be ready for some kind of a pilot to validate this. So we would drop a small protocol. You will get a link to use it in your practice, and then we would do some kind of validation pilot in terms of what you would do without the tool and what the tool is suggesting to you, whether they match and how well they match. Things like that. You will still need to help us with that. But before then, just like Erin has shown, there are a series of publications that will be coming your way, manuscript that will be coming your way for your input also. So that, like I mentioned, that's just the first phase of the publications. I think there's loads of papers we can write up with what we've done. So we count on your continuous support. So don't leave us alone yet, please. We need you. We need to stick together, if not forever, for a very long time, please.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. I think we can wrap it up if there isn't any questions or any comments, suggestions.
Toby,
Was it? No?
Yeah, I'm still here. But,
okay, good.
I might get disconnected in a few minutes. I sent you.
No worries.
Okay, you're back. Okay, if that's it, if there's no questions, I think we can finalize our.
Sorry. Is it possible?
Yes.
Is it possible to summarize this presentation and send to us?
Yes, we'll be delighted to. Yep.
Definitely. In any case, when you get the manuscript, actually it's the whole presentation in the manuscript.
Okay.
You'll have the manuscript either Monday or Tuesday next week, the latest. Okay. It will be. So what's left is next week. Please be very critical with the paper. Okay. Smash it into pieces, please.
Yeah,
will do.
Pretend you are WHO, bulletin of the WHO.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, Rev. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for a nice meeting.
Thank you.
We're very delighted you managed to make it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care. Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I understand now. They try. No, they're saying I should forget.
What I'm even praying, they should make it in form of application.
No, that was the app.
No, they're saying app. So that even anywhere you are, can access the app.
Yes.
So that if you won't assume that maybe the clinician are lying to you, you'll be seeing what is happening to you live through your phone. If your viral load is high, you will know. If it is low, you will know. When they will put us, so that you won't think that they are increasing your viral load inside MIEP.
Very good application. Now it's making sense to me.
Which window again?
I had an idea of the concept, but when they were trying to populate, give me figures, I didn't do it. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. When do you leave, sir? Continue with the